welcome back, and we are moving into our second segment for today as we get the details of Belize's first B2B Waste to Energy and Renewable Energy Fair. And we're joined at this time by representatives of the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. She's the program analyst at UNDP Belize, Diane Wade. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
This is, of course, something that is being done in partnership with the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, right? And it's focusing on one of the things that we keep on talking about, which is renewable energy. Let's just take a little step back to find out what work has been going on with UNDP, the 5 Cs, and the other partner agencies in this event.
Well, the 5 Cs and UNDP share a common work program with the government of Belize. And within that work program, as it relates to climate change, one of the things that has been highlighted is the need to explore and diversify the energy options of the country. Under the energy strategy of the country, it is expected that by year 2020, the country would have decreased its dependency on fossil fuels. And in order to do that, well, we need to see what else is there as energy options. And so in keeping with this overall national priority, UNDP was approached by the 5 Cs about 2 years or so ago. The 5 Cs had ongoing partnerships with the GIZ and other development partners, looking at energy and looking at primarily as it relates to gasification in country. And so when UNDP was contacted, we were contacted to advance some of the works that had already started under that program. And so we started a small project with the 5 Cs that looked primarily at the feasibility of biofuels, of gasification in Belize for certain biomass. And so the entire project has been about looking at what we have. There was a mapping component which mapped out where we had it, and to see if it was viable to invest in gasification plants around the biomass types that we had in country.
Having done that particular study or survey of what exists, what are some of the findings in terms of what is available as an alternative option?
We have a lot, and I think that is a positive note on which to move forward from. Biomass is everywhere. From the garbage that we take out, it is measured that approximately 33% of that is biomass and can
not being used.
Biomass meaning it is of organic content. It can be broken down into some type of energy source. In Belize, we traditionally treat biomass by burning and creating energy through that, as is the case of the cogeneration, or pardon me, at BSI, the sugar industry. I'm not sure if they're BSI anymore.
ASR,
yes. Where they utilize their bagasse now to generate energy to run their mills, but also to feed into the grid. So, but we've never yet considered the gasification options. You had very early studies in the country that looked at biomass associated with the citrus industry, but citrus waste, because of its acidic content, does not provide for the best alternative. And so within this study, we were able to look at, of course, the manures coming out of the agricultural sector, the pig, the chicken manure and cow. We were able to look again at the waste generated from our industries, from the sugar, the citrus, and also the banana. but also look at the waste generated from unlikely sources, places that we've not looked at before, or sewer, or the sewer effluent that comes out, and its potential. And one of the things that the studies have shown, if we are looking at a small gasification unit for energy generation, perhaps the best place for us to look at this point is within the banana and from the sewage waste, sewage effluent.
Okay, so it's essentially looking at the potentials for opportunities from these organic waste at this point in time. Now, has there been a cost factor put in place with the study?
Just very, very initial. What we did was is considered a pre-feasibility. We had very able consultants coming out of the Netherlands, I believe TNO, that were able to, after identifying the best option, identify potential pilot sites for projects. So what we hope is to now move into a phase 2 of the project where we get these pilots funded.
Okay. Now, the conversation around renewable energy, as you pointed out, is one that has been ongoing, and we can identify particular areas where we know efforts are being made, Belcogen being one great example there. With the upcoming fair, it's obviously being able to share where all people are utilizing renewable energy in the country. And also, I understand there are opportunities for further funding for these type of projects. Do you think it's perhaps an underutilized area where people don't try to access funds to be able to work on renewable energy projects?
Not necessarily underutilized. I think it's just that it is an emerging area. It is still in its infancy. A lot of what we have seen in terms of renewable in the country, apart from the larger the dams and the things to that effect, is that people use it at, you have some individuals using it at a household level. We've had some forms of it attached to our agricultural system for some time now in the integrated farming systems, where biogas was collected again from manure and things, and then fed back into the agricultural systems. So the idea, I think it is a new one, and normally because we thought about it on larger scales, I think now that the opportunities present themselves to scale it down to a business, to scale it down to a household, I think that is where now you're starting to see the interest. The whole idea of funding is more an idea of removal of the barriers, because it has been, or it is insecure because it is new, as in everything else.
And I wanted to tap into one particular area there. We often hear from persons who work in this field that there is a need to be able to match policies and legislation so that an investment in any renewable project and mass scale renewable energy project would be beneficial. In other words, if I create a program that can electrify my home and I have excess electricity coming from that program or that project, it is unclear what I can or cannot do with it at this time. Can I sell it to BL and make money from it? And those are perhaps some of the policies and legislations that aren't in place as yet. So I know that usually these type of programs happen simultaneously. You work on trying to get people involved and also work on the interaction with the policymakers. How are we on that end?
It's my understanding, with my interaction with the Ministry of Energy, thankfully here in Belize, we have an energy sector that is fairly clearly mapped out as it relates to the energy goals of the country. And these things have been identified. I do know that the legislation, as you indicate, to sell back to the grid from a homeowner standpoint, is not in place, but I do know that these things are currently being looked at. and have been prioritized within the national agenda. The Ministry of Energy is very, very much fully engaged in looking at microgrid solutions and household solutions to energy demand. And so they are also working upstream with a hopes to get the relevant regulations and policies in place within the next 6 to 8 months.
How receptive has the Belizean public been with regards to the idea and the implementation of renewable energy practices?
I think as receptible as money affords it, because understand the options that are available to us. If if you're talking the solar and the wind and the whatsoever, they've never really been considered low cost. This is changing now, particularly as it relates to solar technology. It is becoming more affordable, and so you are seeing more and more people moving towards that. I think the idea, and I can be wrong, but this is something that's in the longer run, apart from doing its part to save the environment and the climate emissions and things to that effect, this is something in the longer run that will save people money. And in my years, I've realized that anything that saves people money tend to be very, very well accepted by the general masses.
Here's a follow-up question to that. You mentioned the idea of solar energy. Locally, aren't there regulations that prohibit, to an extent, correct me if I'm wrong, the use of solar energy versus the existing grid system that we have when it comes to electricity?
To the best of my knowledge, there isn't anything that prohibits it. I think where the discussion gets a little murky is what Marlene indicated. When I am producing excess, what do I then do with it? It's returned to the grid. There is nothing stopping the average Belizean from tying up his or her home and generating her own or his own energy, whether it be solar, whether I put in a digester in my yard and I feed my home with biogas. There is nothing that stops it. It is the regulations are currently coming in place, but it's primarily as it relates to the interaction with the grid.
So theoretically, if I get this correct, theoretically, I can rig my house with several solar panels and come off the BL grid altogether, correct? And then if I produce more than what I need, therein lies the problem. If I wanted to sell that, or if I wanted to
how you deal with that
power,
is what is still will still being worked out. But you have many people that have been doing exactly that. As it relates to, and all you need to do is to take a ride down the Placencia Peninsula. You will see a lot of the homes there are moving to renewables. You have some small wind turbines associated with some. Many of them have large sheets of solar panels. So the fair coming up on Wednesday is to have those people that are interested in renewable technology, no matter where what the source, to be able, it provides them with a platform to network, to have these exact same conversations as it relates to, and also being able to expose them to the other stakeholders that have a say in it, to the Department of Environment, of course the DFC, because that is where we are seeing as having great potential to start to fund these things.
They have a specific product line for renewable energy projects, right? Yeah. Now, Diane, I know that it is what we're talking about seems to be more on a larger scale, and correct me if I'm wrong. And one of the areas we see taking place in other countries as well is kind of incentivizing the everyday household move towards renewable energy. So you spoke about, I can't recall, the biogas production within your own yard, or solar energy within your own household. Would you say that that is a part of the priority or a good move for Belize at this point in time? Perhaps instead of establishing large-scale renewable energy production plants, moving towards households kind of just becoming more independent in their own production?
Well, just by, in terms of what is necessary at this point, you do have households that are away from the grid.
Yeah.
That you need energy solutions for. So by sheer necessity, it is an area that needs to be looked at, because it will be too costly to get them on the grid, you know, things to that effect. But from a household standpoint, as I said, it is the strategy of the Ministry of Energy does not limit renewables to the great,
To the mass production.
the mass production system.
Yeah.
It speaks of the integration of renewables within the energy mix, so however it is. And I do believe, because for the example of what we're doing, we are looking, or the solutions that have been found, while understand these are by no means comparable to the large. One of the criteria for selection of pilots was to see the waste associated with certain communities, whether it's being so that you can perhaps service one or two communities. So these aren't large generation plants. The other solutions, primarily the solutions looking at gasification or the use of biogas to create thermal energy, as you had there. Those are solutions that can be scaled down to the household level. I think the only limiting factor is whether or not the technology can scale you down.
There's this general perception that renewable energy and the idea of conservation and that sort of stuff is relegated to primarily the agriculture sector. For some reason, you have this regular one-on-one conversation with the any man out there, and you mention renewable energy and they think, oh, that's for farmers, and that's that's how you deal with.
I think it's just because it's where the opportunities lie. The reality is agriculture is a key doorway into renewables. It can be from the simple production or the agricultural production of certain grasses to feed into larger plants or things. The energy in the case of our discussion speaks to, as it relates to waste to energy, and so you have to go where that waste is generated.
Where there's more waste.
Which is, and if we are looking at organic waste, where do you find it? The agricultural sector. So it's just that the agricultural sector kind of lends itself naturally to going in that direction. Agriculture, forestry, and fisheries as well. The shrimp heads that come out of your aquaculture ponds. So it is wherever the source can be found. One of the things about, or one of the limitations about household waste is that as an individual household, the amount you are generating might not be feasible to do anything but to produce you some butane to run your stove, kind of something like that.
And that's in a very negligible amount too, because if you have a small family, you generate less waste, so you would need more to, it's not feasible, it doesn't seem feasible in terms of running a small operation.
So at a household level, you may want to throw on some solar water heaters, you might want to throw on some solar panels and things, and still do your composting to save the world. But
Yeah.
the reality is it's where the opportunities are. It's where, in this case, where you can find the sources to drive your energy production.
From an economic perspective, from an economic perspective, how do you balance the idea that one could easily argue it's cheaper for me to purchase electricity from the grid as it exists versus having to invest in solar panels and all these other infrastructure to be able to begin the process of renewing?
That was an argument, very, very much valid one for about 10 or so years ago. But what you see is that more and more investments in renewable energy technology pays its way out very, very quickly. Your investment in your solar panel, for the most part, you recover most of what you've invested in terms of not paying electricity and all the other things. You normally recover your investment within a couple of years at most, 2 or so years at most. Some investments you recover much earlier,
depending on how much you're using.
Exactly.
And looking at, that's a great point, because I think one of the things that people often look at is the original cost of shifting to renewable energy, even in the household. And we've talked for a long time about perhaps incentivizing it, tax breaks, making it just a bit more affordable to the everyday person. Is that still a direction that is being pushed at this point in time?
It is still one, because it needs to be one. The example that most people give, if you travel into Barbados, you will realize most houses have solar water heaters.
That's right.
And why?
Because
the government,
it's incentivized.
yes, provides incentive for the utilization of solar water heaters. The reality is there are still programs in place before that working on that, the barriers to moving to renewable energy. And those barriers mean that as you move towards it, primarily as you consider things as your investment cost and things, that there will be a need to incentivize it. There will be a need to have special systems set in place until those industries can take root within our social construct. But as I said, this is a discussion that it is a good one. It's one that excites us, but it's one we're still in our infancy.
Yeah.
And we are hoping that Wednesday people come and they learn from each other as it relates to what is there.
So let's get into our details about Wednesday as we get ready to wrap up this segment. It is the first, it's being heralded as the first renewable energy fair. Who will be displaying their services and products at the fair, and who are you hoping will attend?
I do know the providers as it relates to the national counterparts.
Okay.
Well, the fair starts out with a presentation by TNO on the findings of the provision of the opportunities which exist.
Yeah.
The 5 Cs have targeted stakeholders that have an interest in renewable energy. They would depots that have wood chipping waste and things to that effect that can fit into some thermal type plant. So they also those businesses that are already in some way or the other utilizing renewables, like Radisson, I know already have their panels at work that offsets the electricity that so the stakeholders have been invited from, of course, the agricultural sector, the tourism industry, the government of Belize, the regulatory agencies, because a lot of the questions have to do with the regulatory portions of it. And they, of course, the 5 C's, and they have also invited a couple alongside TNO, a couple other, the DFC I know definitely will be there.
Yeah.
And to present the other options that people have.
In terms of funding?
Yes.
Okay. And so the fair takes place on Wednesday here in Belize City.
Yes, at the Biltmore.
Now, who's the target audience? Who should go and check out what's happening there?
It's business to business. Normally when we have these fairs, it's a general public, and by no means are we excluding the general public, because a big part of the fair is just information lending, to inform people what opportunities exist, what technologies out there. So there is a target of the general public, but it's primarily your representatives from your Chamber of Commerce, your business communities that you want around the table, investors or potential investors you want around the table as well. As I said, it's just a provision of a platform for people with a common interest. In this case, we're looking at renewable energy, waste to energy, energy efficiency. So just a platform of business people and interested stakeholders to come and discuss it from their angle.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for stopping in this morning and telling us all about the fair. The B2B Waste, Energy and Renewable Energy Fair takes place this Wednesday in Belize City at the Biltmore, and it starts at 9 a.m. Open to the public.
Open to the public.
All right. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thanks, Stu.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, Isani?
When we come back, it's to discuss financial planning for the Christmas season. We're going to be joined by members of the St. John's Credit Union.
All right. We'll be back in a few. Stay tuned.